The Institute for Public Diplomacy and Global Communications Walter Roberts Congressional Award recognizes leadership in public diplomacy. Its purpose is to celebrate this country's efforts to communicate with the rest of the world. Now, this is not an aspirational award. It goes to a legislator who we identify as having boosted the vital work of engaging publics, that is, spreading the national message, building national, lasting boundaries across national boundaries. The Walter Roberts Endowment was established about 17 years ago, 2005, with generous contribution from Dr. Roberts himself. And since then, it's been supported by the friends and family of Dr. Roberts, some of whom serve on the endowment's advisory board. The mission of the endowment is to promote best practices in public diplomacy. Dr. Roberts, if you're not familiar with him, was the former associate director of the U.S. Information Agency, and he has been a distinguished figure in U.S. public diplomacy throughout his life. We honor his legacy today through multiple programs, including this award. Now, this year's award winner, we're proud to announce, is Senator Chris Murphy. This award goes to him to recognize his leadership in strengthening U.S. public diplomacy through recent times of momentous challenge, but also great opportunity. Senator Chris Murphy is the junior senator from Connecticut, and he's dedicated his career to public service. He's been a strong voice in the Senate fighting for a forward-looking foreign policy. As a member of the Foreign Relations Committee, he's been an outspoken proponent of diplomacy, a champion of international human rights, and has given us a vision of the world. Today, leaders who work on the front lines of public diplomacy and can better attest to the Senator's record of support. Finally, we'll be announcing the recipient of a grantee we selected from the Senator's home state. Now, at this point, I'd like to turn it over to the Senator for remarks, and if it's not too much trouble, a quick pose with the plaque for a photo so that we can memorialize this event. Thank you, Senator.
Well, thank you so much for this award. I'm very, very humbled, and I will follow instructions and hold it up here for a quick photo. Is that all right? Got it? All right.
Thank you.
Well, William, thank you very much for that kind introduction. I'm really pleased to be part of an event today that has a number of distinguished speakers that will follow me. I'm grateful to the Institute for your support, excuse me, of the World Affairs Council, as I was mentioning backstage. They are an absolute powerhouse in Connecticut, and they are a means by which thousands of people that I represent get access to information about America's place in the world. And I'm always pleasantly surprised when I'm a part of a World Affairs Council meeting or event as to how many people are there. Because as I often tell my colleagues, it often doesn't feel like Americans care as deeply as you might like about international affairs and foreign policy until it's all they care about. Right? We are in one of those moments today where everyone in America is captivated by the Ukrainians' fight for their own sovereignty and independence, and they are commanding their members of Congress to step up and do everything possible to support the Ukrainians. It is a reminder that, well, on most days, Americans are sort of looking at their kitchen table and their pocketbook. They are very aware of the world that we live in. They feel a connection to the rest of the world, especially our democratic brethren in places like Ukraine. And this is a reminder of why we need to do 24/7 work, not just to protect American security, but to provide outlets for citizens who do deeply care about America and the world. I want to thank you, for your work on this issue of public diplomacy. And I'll tell you a little bit about why I care so deeply about improving the quality of America's storytelling and our ability to help others tell their own story, free from coercion and intimidation. I'll be honest, I didn't spend a lot of time on matters of foreign policy when I was in the United States House of Representatives. I came to the Congress as an opponent of the Iraq War. And I was a leading voice as a young member of Congress to get the US out of Iraq and out of Afghanistan. But it wasn't until I got to the Senate that I joined the Foreign Relations Committee and began to do more study and more travel. And it was in 2014, when I was chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee overseeing Europe, that I found myself in the Balkans. I landed in Belgrade in the fall of that year, a part of the world in which it used to be required that every member of the Congress have some level of expertise when that region was at war and America was committing substantial resources to the Balkans. But by 2014, there were very few of my colleagues who knew much about the place. But I had sort of seen how Russia was making great efforts and pains to try to destabilize a region that was still incredibly fragile, a region of the world in which world wars often begin. And when I landed in Belgrade and I was driving to my first event that night, I saw the city peppered with version after version of the same billboard. And the billboard was the Serbian and Russian flags sort of wrapped together. And finally, later that night, when the car happened to stop near one of those billboards, I got out to take a look at the fine print. It turned out that those billboards were paid for by Gazprom, a private Russian company, but one that does the foreign policy business of the Kremlin. They were put up in anticipation of a coming visit by Vladimir Putin to Belgrade, but it was just one small example of the extraordinary costs that other countries put in to the task of public diplomacy. A few years later, when one of the big radio stations in Serbia was put up for auction by the Serbian government, who bought it? But the Russian government. And so just in this relatively small country, an incredibly consequential country, I saw how active other countries were in telling their story and trying to crowd out independent media. I also saw how starved the Serbian people were for connections to America, for information from America, and for objective journalism. This is a country where we spend a fraction today of what we used to in public diplomacy. It's a country where there's a lot of pressures on journalists to kowtow to the line of the government. And it's a place where a little bit of money from the United States government can do a better job of telling the story of America, the story of democracy, and lifting up independent truth tellers inside that small country who want to be able to tell their own stories and the stories of the Serbian people. So I came back from that trip intrigued to figure out how we could do better. And it was not shortly thereafter that I joined together with one of my colleagues, Senator Rob Portman, to develop legislation establishing, or in fact, not establishing, but supersizing at that time, very small entity inside the State Department called the Global Engagement Center. The Global Engagement Center at the time was funded at about $5 million a year, largely to push back against extremist group propaganda. And we wrote enabling legislation that expanded the mission of the Global Engagement Center to fight propaganda efforts all around the world, not just those that were undertaken by violent extremist groups, but also those undertaken by nation state adversaries. And over the last 6 years, the Global Engagement Center has expanded to be about a $60 million a year operation that is doing absolutely fantastic work, largely in the Russian periphery, but also in the Chinese periphery as well, to provide grants to fact checkers, truth tellers, independent journalists, to be able to push back against these dominant propaganda narratives that come out of places like Beijing and Moscow. And it's just vital, because what we are seeing is a concerted effort to undermine democracies through the dissemination of lies and divisive propaganda designed to push people apart from each other in these democracies, designed to undermine people's faith in democracy. We have truth on our side. Democracy is still the best means by which to organize a society. And so by standing up for public diplomacy efforts, by standing up for efforts to fight back against this propaganda, we're protecting our own democracy, we're protecting others' democracy. The president's budget, I was glad to see, includes a pretty generous increase for public diplomacy, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to deliver. Finally, the world is, as I mentioned, today captivated by a conventional military battle inside Ukraine. By and large, the biggest threats that are presented to the United States are not conventional military threats. And so as we celebrate and discuss the importance of public diplomacy today, we should also recognize that the current way that the US National Security Toolkit is resourced is fundamentally misaligned to the actual threats that are presented to us. Propaganda and misinformation are one threat, but there are a host of other non-military threats ranging from climate change to pandemic disease, to kleptocracy and creeping corruption that cannot be defeated through tanks, guns, and planes. And yet today, we are still spending 10 to 20 times as much money on conventional military hardware and intelligence as we are on smart power, democracy, economic aid. We still today have more employees of military grocery stores than we have diplomats in the State Department. That makes no sense if you actually look at the threats that are arrayed against us today. And so my hope is that we will continue to grow our commitment to public diplomacy, but my hope is that we will, frankly, grow a larger commitment to smart power tools that are going to allow us to be able to meet the sort of actual panoply of threats presented to the United States today. So thank you very much for this award. Thanks to the Institute for the work that you put into lifting up the power of public diplomacy. And I'm grateful to be part of a really wonderful event today. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Senator Murphy. It was delightful to hear your sort of origin story of how you developed an interest and an appreciation for public diplomacy, and to get a very current sort of update on what's sort of happening. As one of the commentators in the sidebar noted, Pat Cabra, who's the chair of our endowment, noted that this couldn't be more timely of an award. So thank you for that. I would like now to turn to Jennifer Hall Godfrey, the Undersecretary for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs at the U.S. State Department. Jennifer is a career member of the Senior Foreign Service, and I'm sorry for giving the short version of the biography. I just want to leave more time to hear from our honored speakers. Please.
The short version is fine. I'm the acting undersecretary. We very much hope for a confirmed undersecretary sooner rather than later here in the department. Also, Senator Murphy, thank you for your comments. I feel like you very eloquently laid out the importance of public diplomacy and the importance of the work of the State Department. I couldn't be more grateful as a Foreign Service officer to hear what you just said about the department. So thank you for that. It is really my pleasure to be here today to recognize Senator Murphy for his achievements supporting U.S. foreign policy. I'm grateful to GW's Institute for Public Diplomacy and Global Communication for hosting today's award ceremony and recognizing Senator Murphy. I'm also really glad to see my colleague and friend from the United States Agency for Global Media, Acting CEO Kilu Chow, and you, Will. It's terrific to see you and members of the Walter Roberts Endowment Board here today. Senator Murphy has played a critically important role in advancing U.S. foreign policy as a member of the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations. And as you just heard, he's been a champion of diplomacy, human rights, American leadership abroad, and from my perch, a champion of public diplomacy as well. Among his many achievements on the committee is his longtime support for U.S. public diplomacy, and in particular, the State Department's Global Engagement Center. Senators Murphy and Rob Portman introduced the Countering Propaganda and Disinformation Act, signed into law in 2016, that established the Global Engagement Center, or the GEC. They recognized the increase in the prevalence of state-sponsored disinformation and propaganda and the growing threat it posed to democratic values and governance around the world. This law improved the United States' ability, including the Department of State's ability, to identify and counter foreign disinformation and propaganda. And Senator Murphy, as you just heard, continues to champion the GEC by highlighting its mission and the State Department's role in this fight. Given today's situation in Ukraine, our effort to fight disinformation remains critical, timely, topical, at the top of everyone's mind. The GEC has been working with interagency partners from before the conflict began to expose Kremlin propaganda in the lead up to the invasion. And the GEC continues today to counter wartime disinformation designed to undermine Ukraine, NATO, the United States, and our friends and allies. Recent GEC reports, for example, have helped major social media companies address false content, ensure accounts on their platforms are appropriately identified, and suspend accounts that spread disinformation. And the GEC does not ignore other actors in this space. The GEC is also actively countering the disinformation campaigns of the PRC, of the government of Iran, and of other foreign actors, both state and non-state, that leverage information manipulation, that lie to, among other things, degrade US national security and that of our allies. The GEC actively exposes information these actors seek to hide. One recent excellent example of that is the GEC's support for the development of the largest repository of open source data on the PRC's atrocities in Xinjiang. That repository has provided people around the world with access to the truth, access to facts. And the GEC also sponsors programs globally to counter disinformation and propaganda by building resilience, by promoting free media, and by exposing malign actors in the information space. Senators Murphy's support of the GEC has been critical in enabling us to play this role in combating foreign propaganda and disinformation. As Senator Murphy alluded to, though, it's not enough simply to expose disinformation and propaganda. We must also engage global publics with honest and credible information about US values, priorities, our policy objectives, and the strengths of alternatives to authoritarian governance. That is what the State Department's 4,000 public diplomacy professionals worldwide do through our social and traditional media and our in-person interactions daily. These relationships require trust and credibility. Earning trust and credibility is neither easy nor to be taken for granted, and critically, it's not what our adversaries do. We must show up for this fight and hold firm with the principled engagement that we've learned from for over 70 years through the conduct of our public diplomacy. Senator Murphy, your support for our efforts to counter disinformation, coupled with your understanding of public diplomacy's role in advancing American interests abroad, have really helped us understand and highlight the importance of US foreign policy and the importance of engaging publics on US foreign policy and on the American story that you spoke about so eloquently. So on behalf of the Department of State, and in particular the department's public diplomacy community, including the Global Engagement Center, we thank you for your leadership and your vision, and for your support for holding the line on the trust, credibility, and integrity of the information environment, both the US government's role within that environment and preventing other actors from undermining it with their lies and misleading propaganda and disinformation. So thank you very much, Senator, and congratulations. This is a very well-deserved honor in our view.
Thank you, Jennifer. Now I'd like to turn to Ms. Keilu Chow, the acting CEO of the U.S. Agency for Global Media. Ms. Chow has worked in U.S. public international media for around 4 decades. Thank you. I think you're muted.
Sorry, we have to change a few times in order to be connected. That shows you how vulnerable the technology that, that is. Thank you, Dr. Youmans, for the opportunity to be here today as we honor the enormous contribution of Senator Murphy to public diplomacy and global press freedom. Hello also to Jennifer Hall-Godfrey, who has been a tremendous supporter of the U.S. Agency for Global Media and the media freedom in general. She's also a great leader in public diplomacy arena. As many of you know, Senator Murphy is a strong advocate for U.S. AGM and its networks. We deploy thousands of journalists around the world to provide fact-based reporting and information in countries where press freedom is under threat. Our journalists cover stories that local press can't or won't do, but we also tell the story of America's democratic experience. We will always remember when in 2020, Senator Murphy took a bold and vocal stand in defense of our agency and editorial independence of our journalists. He reminded the world that, I quote here, America is a democracy, and the firewall that we codified as part of the International Broadcasting Act is what distinguishes US AGM-funded networks from state-sponsored propaganda we see in places like Russia and China. Senator Murphy went on to introduce legislation to protect US AGM journalists from outside interference. Senator Murphy, your leadership at that crucial time empowered many of us to stand our ground and fight for the heart and souls of this agency. It is why our network remains credible forces in hundreds of markets globally. Perhaps there is nowhere in the world today where that credibility is more important than in Russia. Every day, Russians are inundated with propaganda to hide the truth about their government's invasion of Ukraine. And yet, despite efforts to block access to our content, in the first 3 weeks of the war, we verified over 1 billion video views of Russian language programs across digital platforms. That is more than 1 billion views, video views in just 3 weeks. In moments like this, it is our credibility and independence that positions us as a trusted voice to break through the Kremlin's echo chamber. We are seeing the war on information play out in Russia, but also across the globe. We will continue our work to bring unbiased information to light, and we look forward to having a Senate confirmed leader at the helm. We can only tackle these issues with the support you and your colleagues have consistently shown, Senator Murphy. This is why, as acting CEO, I'm proud to convey just how grateful we are to have unwavering advocates like Senator Murphy, who have a deep understanding of what is at stake. Congratulations on this important recognition of your steadfast leadership for public diplomacy. And I thank you for continuing to call attention to US AGM's work in press freedom and its critical role in securing a more peaceful, prosperous, and democratic future for us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chow. We've heard rich testimonials that really attest to this award going to Senator Chris Murphy. As also a part of what this award entails is an unrestricted grant for $5,000 to an organization in the awardee's home state. And we at IPDGC have selected an awardee who advances public diplomacy activities. One of the more exciting things about this planning process for us has been getting to know what kinds of efforts to build international bridges are taking place at local institutions and organizations. And after looking at several candidates, we decided to give the grant to the World Affairs Council of Connecticut, which has as its motto, I love this motto, bringing the world to Hartford since 1924. The World Affairs Council of Connecticut uses community engagement and collaboration to explore critical global issues and promote a greater understanding of the world. And as the senator said, he's constantly impressed by the turnout at their events, which attests to their continuing work to keep attention on the world stage. Our final speaker is Megan Torre, the Chief Executive Officer of the World Affairs Council of Connecticut.
Thank you, everyone, and good afternoon. Congratulations to you, Senator Murphy. You are a guiding light here in our state, and we could not be more proud to have you as our senator from the great state of Connecticut. Your thought leadership on foreign policy and your example, your living example of public diplomacy are evident every day in all that you do, and you are so most deserving of this award. Thank you to the Institute for Public Diplomacy and Global Communication for recognizing the work of our World Affairs Council. It is an honor for us to be recognized in this way, and therefore your supporting of all of the work the World Affairs Councils are doing across the country every day to engage our citizens in the world and bring greater understanding of the complex world we live in to communities around the country. At the end of the day, we are all empowered to make the world a better place and more peaceful place. Our World Affairs Council has been here in Connecticut since 1924. So for nearly 100 years, we've been focused on how our community connects to the world and engages in global issues. Each year, our council hosts over 40 forums that bring complex global issues to the heart of our community. And these include our annual Global Security Forum, our annual diplomat event, where we bring diplomatic representation from all over the world right to the heart of our community to meet and engage our citizens, our annual Model United Nations program, which has been in existence since 1952 and reaches over 1,200 high school students from around the state of Connecticut that want to engage and understand their world and solve global problems. Our forums have been addressed everything from freedom and democracy to the global economy to gender-based violence around the world. And of course, we are currently having an ongoing conversation about the current crisis in Ukraine. Connecticut is an extremely global state. We're one of the most export reliant states. 10% of our population was born outside the United States. 23% of our population speaks a language other than English at home. Over 100,000 of our jobs are directly tied to foreign companies, and over 100 languages are spoken just in the city of Hartford in our schools as I sit here today. So what happens in the world matters. How we understand the world and engage in the world matters. I can honestly say, as I sit here today, in the midst of all the uncertainty we all live in, that the work of everyone here today has never been more important, and the work of public diplomacy has never been more critical. Public diplomacy, people-to-people connections, and global engagement create the strong civil society and empowered future leaders that we want to see. These are the cornerstones to building a more civil, productive, just, and secure world for all of us. We are grateful to be recognized alongside our extremely wonderful senator, Senator Murphy, and grateful to have the opportunity to do the work that we do. Collectively, we are all strong, and together we're building a better future. And thank you all for the recognition, and congratulations, Senator Murphy.
Thank you so much, Megan. What a terrific note to end on. I want to thank you all for attending. I want to thank everyone for their time, with my utmost appreciation going to the senator and our honored speakers today for taking out limited and precious time to come together for the mission of public diplomacy. Of course, this is all possible because of the Walter Roberts Endowment, and I want to thank the advisory board for their leadership and for making the work of IPDGC possible. I'd like to also give special thanks to Professor Janet Steele, my predecessor as director. She led the award selection and the planning before handing off things to me at pretty much the last minute. Finally, I want to recognize our program coordinator, Yvonne O, who worked tirelessly to plan this event, and all her interlocutors in the Senator's Office, in the State Department, USAGM, and the World Affairs Council of Connecticut. Thank you all very much. And I appreciate everybody keeping this award to our time limit. And I'm very grateful for all of you being here. Thank you so much.